I am so glad to have y'all here with us. It has been a crazy last 2 weeks. Our program schedules got kind of messed up a little bit, but we've had some really big stuff. So I hope y'all have been paying attention. Uh, Space Frontier Foundation had a big show last week on Tuesday. And I'm hoping that maybe some of y'all watched our show Wednesday last week with the Mars Society. So um, if you did, great. We're going to talk about it some more. If you didn't, I'm going to give you some background information. But our whole show today is really focused on the Mars Society and some of the stuff that's been happening this week. So this is kind of current events. So I'm going to call it. When we do this, we have kind of three sets of programming. We have one where we have a guest, and we do have a really cool guest coming up on. I think it's Wednesday, but it might be next week. Les Johnson, he's a terrific guy that has a background at NASA Advanced Concepts project team. He's the lead investigator of a mission, which is really neat, and he's got a personal passion for interstellar travel. So pretty fascinating. So we have a lot of guests. We've probably had 30 or 40 guests by now, something like that. We do a deep dive into policy and technical documents. I considered doing that one today because there's been some stuff that has been pretty important. I'm going to hold off on it. And then the third thing that we do is a news recap show. And for that, I'm going to go ahead and do that today. I think that's probably pretty important. A lot of stuff has happened in the last few days. But I'm going to, instead of what I normally do, which is focus it on either the money, the policy, or the infrastructure, the hardware of going to space, I'm really going to be focusing on the Mars Society's most recent announcement and some of the stuff that means to me, like my own thoughts about this, because this stuff is really important. And I'm wearing a moon shirt on purpose. I would always count myself as a Martian. Sorry, as a lunatic, not a Martian. But lately some things have changed. Some really big things have changed, and they deserve kind of my not reallocation of priorities, because that's not going to change. I'm still focused on building an elevator on the moon. But definitely, maybe the path to it is a little different than I thought. So I've in the very recent months, I have really spent a lot of time thinking about Mars as a destination, as a goal. And before I get into the Mars Society's announcement that they made on Wednesday, I'm going to give you a little bit of my own personal history because I think that's relevant. When I first got interested in space, I think some of you know I was reasonably financially comfortable. I would never say rich because the Silicon Valley folks have really changed what the definition of rich. But I was quite comfortable for my early 30s, substantially more comfortable than most people in their early 30s. And that gave me the luxury. My wealth came from real estate, and that gave me the luxury to look around and try to identify, what did I want to do when I grew up? And I'd always been interested in space ever since I was a little kid. And so I'm in this spot when I'm at my end of my 20s, earliest 30s, trying to figure out what do I do next. My small internet company had closed in 2001, in the beginning of 2001. The end of 2001. And this being September 11th, was a pretty big deal to me. Not in the same way it was to other people in New York, but it had some really direct personal impacts on me. I didn't lose anybody. I'm not trying to claim that. It was a different kind of impact. Um, but it was around that time that I got to know Dr. Brad Edwards. I think it was October 2001, and might have been November, something in that range. Let's call it October. And he introduced me to the idea of the space elevator, and from there, the whole course of my life pretty radically changed. So fast forward, I got really interested in space-based solar power because the rocketry wasn't available for space-based solar power. I got invited to work on the project of the space elevator as a way of getting mass cargo into space. And that was a pretty big deal. That changed the course of the rest of my life. My very, very first technical conference was after I had when I was interested but not yet committed to working on the space elevator. I wound up going to a conference on my own without Edwards, just so I could kind of get a litmus test for myself about what does this future look like. And I had new friends going to a Mars Society conference, so I decided I would go to a Mars Society conference. I didn't know anything at all about the organization, about the people, about the idea, but that seemed like pretty fun and a pretty good way for me to get a reality check of this new field. There, I met other folks at the Space Frontier Foundation, the National Space Society, the Planetary Society. And as I say, it kind of changed the course of the rest of my life. It was at that Mars Society conference, I think it was 2002, springtime, I think, that I met Elon Musk for the first time. So that was a pretty memorable, interesting meeting. To be very candid, I didn't think much of him then. And that opinion didn't change the other two times I've met him also. But it was a memorable event, the Mars Society back in 2002. And for that, fast forward, I think I worked on the space elevator for 3 years, first under the NASA grant for 2001, 2, and 3, and then independently with the first version of Liftport from 2003, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then we had the first crash of Liftport. So that was the end of those early days. But Mars has kind of been in the background. Eventually, as we moved to focus and rebuild the company in 2017 and 18 to focus on the lunar elevator, Mars kind of, if you will, receded into the background for me. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that I started getting to know James Burke. At the time, he was the vice president of the Moon Society, and he had been one of the founding members over 25 years ago with the Mars Society. So the Mars Society got one of the Club for the Future grants. That's Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin grants. 19 companies got $1 million, and one organization got $20 million. So it was a pretty remarkable day when all those things were announced. The Mars Society was one of the organizations that got $1 million grant. And as a result, they hired James Burke to be the new, and I think, in my own opinion, the new and permanent executive director of the Mars Society. And as I've told him many times, he is going to be at the helm of the Mars Society when we land people on Mars. And I think that is a pretty profound and important position and role that he has. So yeah, fast forward up till, I'm not taking my eye off of the moon, but I am saying that my horizon has expanded to include Mars in a way I did not have before. And most of that comes from this new announcement for the Mars Technology Institute. Some of you may have been paying attention. About 4 months ago, I told you I went to a big meeting that I couldn't really talk very much about because it was private. It was not my story to tell. What they did here in Seattle was host a brainstorming think tank session to talk about this new idea. And it is still just a new idea. It's getting legs, but it doesn't have legs yet. And I'll talk about what that means here in a moment. But what they did is they brought, I don't know, about 24 people together. Maybe it was only 20 people together to talk about this new concept of MTI, Mars Technology Institute. And what would it be and what could it become? And even though I had not previously really thought much about Mars because it's always seemed too far away, I was really swayed. My opinion was changed based on the preface, the foundation that Dr. Zubrin laid out at that meeting. So I'm going to do my best to try to share with y'all what that was, and then my own reactions to it, because I think it is really big news. I think it is really big news, and it has the potential, as I've been saying a lot lately, it's going to change this world and the next one. It's going to change Earth, and it's going to change Mars. And the irony is, I think it's going to change Earth before it changes Mars, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So let me do some preface stuff here. So let me just share a link. So this is what happened last week. Give me a second. So what happened last week was, and I think you all know that we host the Space Frontier Foundation and the Mars Society's shows. Space Frontier Foundation has a program called the Pioneers of Commercial Space Development. That's been going on for about a month and a half now. We're really happy. We just got extended to a second season, so we'll be starting that probably in November. So pretty happy about that. Pardon me, sorry. And then the other thing we've been doing since January, so quite a while, is hosting the Mars Society's Red Planet Live podcast. Red Planet Live podcast. I'm pointing a link to it. It's been great. It's been super fun to do that. And what they decided to do is make the announcement about the Mars Technology Institute on their show. And it was really, really well received. So what we did is we brought in Ashton Zeth. She's the host of the show, to introduce Dr. Zubrin. Dr. Zubrin's the founder of the Mars Society. He's been focused on Mars for nearly 4 decades, so pretty remarkable guy. But then we also brought in this reporter, Alan Boyle, to do an on-camera Q&A. And that was really nice. It was great that Alan did that. We're really grateful to him for doing that. I'm going to just read off a quote that was very nice. Hold just one second. I don't have any way to share this on the screen, so I just have to do it the hard way. So during the, so I know you really can't see that, but that's Alan Boyle. And during the interview, somebody wrote very nicely, "Thank you, Alan Boyle, for substantiating MTI's credibility by asking the tough journalistic questions. Total pro!" Exclamation point. So Alan Boyle has been in the space news business for 20 years. I have known him for 20 years. When my company first went out of business, when Liftport first went out of business back in 2007, Alan is the only person that I trusted to tell the whole story of the collapse of my company. I'm good friends with several reporters. I like reporters in a really important way. They've been really significant and ultimately very powerful to the growth of my company over time. But when we were failing, it was Alan that I went to tell the story. And so I have known him for a long time. I hold him in very high regard. And so it was really terrific that he did the online Q&A for this program. So I'm going to encourage you to watch this program. The link is here. Just a moment. If you haven't seen it, definitely take a look at this. It's a really great overview of the Mars Society's new technology institute. It's got almost 2,300 views, so that's really great. It's been getting steady press, so we're going to talk about that in a minute. It's an hour and a half long. The last half hour, the last 15 minutes are really primarily Zubrin answering questions to his community of the Mars Society. I would say the meat of it is between 10 minutes and an hour, where he goes into some depth for the Mars Society. So take a look at that. Some of these comments are brilliant. I really have appreciated them. So that's really nice. That's fun. So take a look at what they're doing over at Red Planet Live. It's been pretty cool. So with that article, it has gone from GeekWire. I think by now you know how the internet works, where there's a lot of copycats. And so Yahoo picked it up and basically posted it verbatim. So that's nice. That helped spread the story a little bit. Locally here in the Seattle region, the Journal of Commerce posted something which I can't actually read because it requires a subscription and I'm not willing to pay for it. Since I was there, I know what it says. But I was curious about what this article said, because it is nice to see that the um, journal, not the Wall Street Journal, the Journal of Commerce, is covering that. That's pretty great. That was kind of unexpected. Um, I'm going to post the link in case people do locally have a subscription. Oh, well, thank you. Hey, I'm going to post this note here. Thanks, Mr. Lane, for your live shows. They're very informative with the space community and expanding our new frontier for manned missions to Mars. Thank you. I appreciate your comments. We've been doing this since about October last year, so just close to a year now. And, I like our shows. I think our shows are really important. But it's really an honor to be working with the Mars Society and the Space Frontier Foundation, because I think what they're doing is really important. So appreciate that. Thanks for the comment. Alan Boyle writes his own articles that he keeps a running track of at the Cosmic Log. So this is basically the same story. I would recommend that you get to know who Alan Boyle is. He's done some amazing reporting in his 20-year career. He is about 80% retired at this point. He and Leonard David is the other reporter I know the best, and then maybe behind that would be Jeff Faust. But Leonard David and Alan Boyle are pretty near retiring. Not fully, not ready yet, but they are doing less work than they used to do. So it was really nice to have Alan come on to the show and host it. So that was Wednesday. And then let me get a little bit more of the copycat stuff. So this is just copycat stuff, and you know how the internet works. They're gonna take a story that's got a little bit of juice behind it, mildly rewrite it or not write it at all, and use it to get advertising and clicks. That's how the internet works. So I don't know who these folks are. Doesn't matter to me one tiny little bit. They're just reposting what is already out there. This one is slightly different. They have misspelled the name or misordered the name, Mars Institute of Technology, and they're now calling it MIT. So we're definitely going to be watching that. They've taken the art and modified the art. They're trying to do some things to make this their own story, but it's not their own story. I do like that there's some Spanish in here. I don't know if that is for clickbait or if it's because he has a Spanish name. I really don't know. But again, this is for selling space-related T-shirts. It's just a copy of a copy of a copy, and that's how the internet works. Here's another one. This one goes a little. They write a little bit that's somewhat interesting. Mars Society is operating stations in Utah and the Canadian Arctic. By the way, I talked to one of the guys from the Canadian Arctic Friday. Very interesting, some of the stuff he was talking about. So these are just copycat articles. I'm just showing you them because, again, I think it's kind of important to know how this story spreads. I'm just going to blip this up for a moment. Ignore this. The Mars Society does not pull money off of their shows. I know that for a fact. But these icons are Ashton's shows, Red Planet Live, and you can kind of see what we've gotten over the last 9 months or so. So pretty happy about this. Like this makes me happy for our clients, and it's good for us. I really love that they've gotten so many subscribers in the last few months, and their view numbers are pretty high. So, yeah, this is all since their show started. This is their first show. So, and then a final copycat. And so what I'm saying is that the word is starting to percolate out. Now, I'm going to stop sharing here for a moment. I am a little disappointed that it hasn't made what I consider to be national news. I think it should have. I think it was supposed to. I think it deserves national attention. So we're going to try some stuff to get it back on the proverbial radar. I think that's really vital to the success of this thing. I've been saying all along, this is a $10 million project or nothing. And I think it doesn't stop at 10 million. It moves from 10 million to 100 million pretty fast. And I think anybody who's been watching our shows for the last nearly year knows that I know the numbers behind my claim, right? So there's 1,800 funded space companies totaling $280 billion that has gone into the commercial space sector. Now, are they going into Mars? No. Are they going into the moon? Almost no. We did some stats with, we looked over some stats in a report from Space Capital maybe 2 months ago. No, sorry, it wasn't that long, 6 weeks ago. And we reviewed their latest stats, and only about 400 million of that 280 billion has gone into the moon. Not one nickel that I'm aware of has gone into commercial development of Mars. So I know what the hill that we're trying to climb looks like. But I think this is not speaking for Dr. Zubrand, it's not speaking for James Burke. I think that if we make this thing attractive to the venture community, that we can pull in a lot of money. And one of the things that Zubrand said a couple of days ago was, quote, an empire of startups, unquote. And if you look at companies like TechCrunch or especially Y Combinator, an incubator program that focuses on advanced technology can become quite successful. And so in subsequent conversations since then, the phrase, we're going to incubate Mars, I've been using that phrase over and over and over again. And I don't mean it like an incubator for eggs or babies. I'm thinking of it from a commercial perspective as a technology incubator. And we're going to incubate Mars. I think that's really an accurate description. So with that in mind, with all of those things in mind, on Friday, I helped connect the Mars Society with the Space Frontier Foundation. Hold on a second, let me get their link here. I thought I had this one already up, but I did not. So give me a second. So the Space Frontier Foundation has been around for a long time. This is their 35th anniversary, which is why we're doing their Pioneers series with them. But I told you how I got into space. I went to the Mars Society event first. But I quickly saw that, in my view, that Mars was too far away, and so I definitely got more interested in the Space Frontier Foundation. And I've been an advocate of the Space Frontier Foundation for a really long time, nearly 2 decades. Maybe it was 15 years, but I've been an advocate for a long time. I missed my first pinning and didn't officially become one until 2017 or 18, I think. But I've been in the background in the Space Frontier Foundation for a really long time. And what I came to the conclusion with was, while I've been working in the background to evaluate MTI and I've been kind of seeing the inner workings, what I came to the conclusion was that there's a good reason the Space Frontier Foundation and the Mars Society never really connected. And that was, for most of the folks that are interested in the Space Frontier Foundation, they are technology development folks. They want to actualize in near term, in real time. They want to actualize the technologies necessary to go to space. So appropriately, they mostly focus on satellites, communication, observation, to a lesser degree, but importantly, space stations. And then there's a few of them that work on rocketry and the moon. But very few, in fact, none that I can think of, were focused on Mars, because Mars was just considered too far away. So fast forward to our meeting about 4 months ago here in Seattle. Zubrin says two really critical things. One, if you can assume that transportation to Mars has been solved, and he gives good reasons for that. SpaceX, Blue, half a dozen reusable rocketry companies just in the United States alone. You expand that out to Europe and Asia, it becomes 10 or 15 reusable rocketry companies very, very quickly. 2 dozen reusable rocketry companies around the world means that either soon or already, the transportation systems to get people en masse into orbit has effectively been solved. And I think that's accurate. Can we put people on Mars now today? No, absolutely we cannot. But we are very, 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 very close. Closer than I was really paying attention to. And then the other assumption, if transportation has been solved, then the other assumption is someday there will be 100,000 people living on Mars. And I think that's true of the moon. So why would I split hairs and say if it's true on the moon, why is it not true on Mars? And I couldn't come up with an answer. I could not come up with a reason that would be a showstopper for Mars. So I bought into Zubrin's arguments, hook, line, and sinker, that transportation has been largely solved and that there eventually will be 100,000 people on Mars. So if you can swallow that, and I know for some people it's definitely a stretch. I've been working on a mythical space elevator, first on the Earth and then on the moon, for 20 years of my life. So I can look into the future. I have a reasonably accurate crystal ball, and I can say, okay, this is a future I believe in. I think this is going to happen. So how do I help? That was it. That was kind of what got me here. How do I help? So from that, Zubrin then proceeded to kind of break down his argument. And I'm going to showcase another video I want you to watch. Hang on just a moment. So about a month and a half ago, Dr. Zubrin went and gave a lecture to to a science fiction community of all things, a Star Trek convention. And this was, a month ago, early August, 5 weeks ago. This one really kind of breaks down into some detail his thoughts. And I am going to try to put my own ideas based on his thoughts. So I'm not copying him. I'm kind of like using him as a starting point and riffing off of it. So definitely encourage you to watch this video. It's quite intriguing. And then I'm going to show my own thoughts very quickly on a PowerPoint. Just give me a second. Okay. I kind of love these Midjourney images. There's something technically wrong with absolutely every image in this deck. Nevertheless, I think they're pretty fun, pretty playful, and I don't want you to take them seriously because I'm not taking them seriously. But I do like them in the way that they spark the imagination. So, here's Mars, right? And one of the things that Zubrin keeps saying is that we have the ability to send an expedition basically now, whether that's 4 people, 6 people, 8 people, whatever the number is. We're basically ready. I think he said the other day he expects the first crewed mission possibly 2026. That seems a bit ambitious to me, but 2028, 2030, I could see that. And he and I have had conversations on camera before where he lays out some rationale for the next president, looking at what SpaceX is capable of doing, what other companies are capable of doing, and using that as a catalyst for the administration to focus their energy on Mars. And it was a pretty credible argument. So I just showcased this video. I definitely want you to take a look at it. What he's saying is, look, we've got the transportation. The transportation element if it hasn't been solved today, it's imminently solved. It will be solved in the very, very near future. Even if Elon Musk individually is distracted by Ukraine and distracted by the app formerly known as Twitter, which I keep thinking about when the artist formerly known as Prince changed their name into a symbol. And I'm like, wow, has Musk kind of lost his mind there, the way Prince did for a little while? Anyway, that's an inappropriate sidebar. But if it doesn't matter if Musk individually is sidetracked by these other things, the organization, the company of SpaceX and its development of Starship probably means that the transportation system is effectively or imminently solved. So if that's true, the Mars Technology Institute is going to focus on everything else. What else? What do we not have? What are the holes? If transportation was the one that we were waiting on, cool, we've got it solved. What's left? What do we have to figure out in order to make Mars settlement real? And so what are the challenges? And they really break down to food, power, and labor. Um, and one of the reasons why I personally decided to jump on this was his argument was uh, that by solving these problems, we also solve problems here on Earth. Just an hour before the show started, I'm in my office building, and I was talking to somebody, and they're like, "Why?" Right? Like, they're not connected to this field, this industry at all, and they have a legitimate question: Why? And my response to them, and I'll talk more about this in a moment with the food piece, was that if we can solve food for Mars, we have also solved food for Earth. If we can solve the problem of feeding 100,000 people in a limited environment with low energy requirements, low energy inputs, we can take the technology that we use to feed a 100,000 person settlement on Mars and turn that into a food source for the people of Earth. That has profound, life-changing, world-changing implications, which is why I said earlier, I think we're going to change life on Earth before we change life on Mars just by creating this institute. So I'm pretty well known for this phrase. There's a profound difference between difficult, very, very hard, and impossible. It's important to know the difference. I've been quoted by that line, I don't know, for at least 20 years, almost 20 years. I probably used it for the first time in maybe 2004, 2005. It's been on T-shirts. I'm told that somebody made a poster of it. I think to me, when I delivered it, it was kind of a throwaway line, but other people have attributed it to me quite a few times since then. And I show it only because I'm reading my own words to myself. I'm counseling myself in those lines that we can start a research group here on Earth that will make a self-sufficient Martian settlement. We can do that now. We can begin that now. There's absolutely no reason to delay. And if the payoff is as significant, as extreme as I think it's going to be, then we should put our resources into this. The world should put our resources into this. So if the problems are food, power, and labor, then the solutions are chemistry, energy, and hardware. That's not supposed to be there. That agriculture technology, environmental controls and life support, reclamation and recycling, those things are all necessary for Mars. We're not going to have a city dump that you can take, your old office chair when you're done with it and take it to the city dump. All right. If it breaks a wheel, we have a disposable culture down here on the world, and it just winds up in a landfill. We don't have that luxury on Mars. We're not going to pollute that planet. So how do we take the things that we don't use and recycle and reclaim them in a way that's valuable? That comes down to chemistry. How do you feed 100,000 person population if you don't have access to the massive amounts of fertilizers that we use and dump in the soils every day all over the world, the bread baskets of the world, California, Ohio, Ukraine, all over the world. We've become very dependent on various agriculture technologies, but we don't have those available to us in the Martian ecosystem. So And I use the word ecosystem lightly, right? You understand that. So how do we build better chemistry to make food better for Mars? And again, like I said a minute ago, if we can solve food for Mars, we can solve food for the Earth. So lots of different kinds of environmental controls, life support systems are going to be necessary for Mars. Maybe that doesn't have an immediate impact down here on the ground. That one is a little fuzzier. But the chemistry side and the ag tech, food tech, and the recycling reclamation, those have immediate payoffs for all the peoples of Earth. Power, right? If your problem is power, then the solution is how do we get energy? And people often assume that Zubrin's expertise is in aerospace engineering or something like that, and aerospace architecture, something like that. His PhD is in nuclear engineering, so definitely he has authoritative positions on how to make power. And here's a graphic that I love. Again, Midjourney is broken. It doesn't understand what Mars is like. And we are definitely not going to have wind power on Mars. That math does not work. There's not enough atmosphere. So while the wind might blow fast, there's not enough pressure for it. So we won't be doing that. We will be developing fission and fusion nuclear power, Stirling engines, temperature differential engines are going to be important. I'm a big believer, because of my space elevator work, on beaming and wireless energy transfer. I think that's going to be super important. Batteries are going to be the key to Mars. However we get the power, storing it, putting it in the right place, grid management is absolutely vital. And if we get it wrong, people are going to die. So the chemistry of Mars, Zubrin talks about the miracle of manna in the desert. Now, I understand that he's not a very spiritual man or not a very religious man. I don't know that much about his beliefs in that regard, so I don't want to put words in his mouth. But when he was talking 4 months ago, one of the things that really stuck out in my mind was that making the desert bloom, bringing forth food from the desert, is the very definition of the Judeo-Christian version of a miracle. Manna in the desert is a miracle. And that was profound to me. So if we can do that, if we can solve energy, I think we have a chance to get into Mars. And I think that those two things deeply ripple throughout global earthly civilization. And then the last thing, hardware. It's hardware. It's hardware and hardware and hardware and all, and the overriding software elements. At some point, you're going to have to say, open the pod bay doors, Hal. And you're going to be in a spacesuit, and you're going to be walking towards a structure, and you're going to have to, have a command, open the pod bay doors, Hal. And I don't think you need to do that anymore. I think you're going to have wireless communications, brain-computer interfaces, artificial intelligence, and robots, because the labor shortage of Mars is going to be so extreme that you're going to have to continually gadget your way into a solution to a problem. And you're going to see it over and over and over again. So those are my views of Dr. Zubrin's views of going to Mars. So I think it's going to be pretty fun. I think the Mars Technology Institute will be will have ripple effects going far, far into the future. The rollout plan has already started to happen. We had the event first with their announcement last Wednesday, and then on Friday, I connected the Space Frontier Foundation with the Mars Society, so the foundation's community of funders and builders could meet with the society's community of science and engineering, because those two groups, I think they should be working together. There's going to be another project which I can't talk about yet. I don't have much of a role in it, and once again, it's not my place to tell it. But there is going to be another thing happening, I think, in a week or two. It's going to be really close. Daniel, I'll get to you in a second. I like your comments. I'll bring them up here in a second. I want to recommend that everybody join down in Arizona for the Mars Society's conference. It's going to be a pretty great show, pretty great event. Arizona State University students are free. We really want to stress that. If you are a student from another group, it's pretty inexpensive. Everybody else, it's about $240. Seniors get a discount. So I really recommend spending some time, if you can get to Arizona in just a few weeks, that you do that. And here's their actual announcement. I guess I should have posted that a while ago. But the conference is going to be pretty great. There's a really strong, no surprise, there's a really strong emphasis on the Mars Technology Institute. There will be a press conference and an invitation-only meetup for potential funders and researchers. So that's going to be pretty fun. And we think there's going to be some other announcements there. So this launch schedule is kind of multifaceted, right? We had the Red Planet Live and then Space Frontier Foundation meeting. Then they're going to host another thing happening in about 2 weeks. There might be another announcement maybe this week. Still trying to figure that one out. And then over the next couple of weeks, as we get closer and closer to the conference, and then after the conference is when they'll start doing big fundraising developments. So the hope is that this thing is launched by the beginning of next year. So really, have some substance behind this thing and put some wealth behind it and start doing the work. So pretty exciting. I really have been happy to be a part of the stuff in the background. Dr. Tompkins, I'm specifically talking to you. I think you should submit to go to the conference, and I know that you have some tech that's relevant and asked to be a part of the MTI track. I'm going to read some of your comments here. Unlimited biology and unlimited power both solve for the future. Absolutely, right? It's this that made me realize that Mars was a lot closer than I thought it was. And it's that one line, the biology and energy component of it, made me realize that the ripple effects on Earth are more significant than just sending 100,000 people to Mars. And I'm going to showcase your other comment here. the value of applying it to Earth is immense. True future civilizations, if they can grow, the frontier is opened. I went through the last 20 years having a lot of doubt and skepticism towards Mars because it just seemed like it was too far away, too complicated. There wasn't a commercial element to it, and there wasn't any immediacy for Earth, right? Like I joke about being, sorry, I don't want to have that up there. I joke about being a lunatic versus a Martian, but what I really, really am is I'm an Earthling. I'm an Earthling, and I've been asked before if I would climb up on my elevator, and I told everybody I'd be the first one, and I would, but it's a joyride for me. I'm not the person who's going to go to the moon and settle it. I'm not the person who's going to go to Mars and settle it. I want to build Columbus's ships. I don't want to sail with Columbus. But the kind of unlimited potential for Earthlings by going to the moon, by going to Mars, that's irresistible to me. It's absolutely irresistible to me. So I appreciate your comments, Daniel. I want to encourage you to maybe attend the conference. There are virtual presentations. They are most of the abstracts for presentations have already been developed and have been approved, but they are opening some stuff up for the MTI track. So I encourage you, if you're interested, to put an abstract in. They're going to bias towards the people that are in the room with a pulse, but if necessary, they will accept presentations done digitally, virtually. So I know that there's some folks coming in from Africa, all over, a couple people from Europe. I'm inviting some folks from the Netherlands, Montreal, Canada, and a couple places in the US. But the MTI track is going to be particularly compelling, so I recommend it. And with that, I'm going to close out our show for the evening. Thanks very much. I know we don't usually do this, but I think there's just been so many pieces to this Mars Technology Institute that I wanted to cover it in my own way. When tomorrow we've got a combined show with the Space Frontier Foundation. They're pioneers for commercial space development. We're going to have Sam Caniglio, Tom Olson, and Rod Godwin on the show. They're going to each tell a fascinating story of their own history in the commercial space development. And then Wednesday, we either have a guest or I've got a policy show. We don't have that guest quite. We know he's coming. We just aren't sure whether he's going to be on this Wednesday or next Wednesday. All right. And with that, thanks very much, y'all. We will see you tomorrow. Have a good night. Bye-bye.